Hi, welcome to our show. I'm Ray.
And I'm Crystal, and we are students of astrology, candidly musing every week on what's new.
For those just joining us, we're going to go over the transits and themes and experiences that we're seeing.
So follow along to learn more with us. So, Ray, how are you this week?
This week's been kind of interesting. It feels like a lot happened, and at the same time, nothing happened.
Yeah,
How's,
it was
yeah,
interesting.
how's
Yeah.
it been for you?
Oh God, like the Mars retrograde killed me more than I anticipated. So I've been like going like crazy, basically thinking about it. And like all the themes popping up. Didn't expect it to be this crazy, fam, but shit, it really was.
Oh yeah, it was pretty literal for me. I was at work and I was with three other people. And normally it's only two or three people total, and we had four. And one of them had big Scorpio stellium, like four or
Mm,
five planets in there. Very obvious. I knew before I even looked at the chart, I was like, there's got to be. She said Sun was in Libra, so I was like, that's close enough. That means at least Mercury and Venus has to be in there, and they were, and a few other things. Um,
and the Stella.
yeah, and then another coworker had Scorpio moon, and I was like, conjunct Mars, or not Mars, it's Pluto at that.
Mm,
Um, so it was very Martian experience. We were also, the nature of the job is like traveling, and so my third house specifically is like Gemini. So we were like literally traveling, and Mercury also rules my sixth, which is like healthcare and small animals, and it's like veterinary medicine. Which is like also Mars ruled. And so it was very, very literal. They were very loud, very rambunctious, and a lot of fun. So it's a pretty good day.
yeah, Mercury rules my seventh house. And Gemini is my seventh house. And Mercury also rules my 10th house, which is my persona. So I do feel like I have been experiencing a lot of like blessings, but like a lot of like
Mm.
reflections that are coming up. And I'm just like, ugh, I don't know what to do with like myself these days. So yeah, I'm getting chattier and bolder and things. So yes.
Chattier and bolder. That's very Mercury and Scorpio. Um, which is exciting because I'm thinking a lot. There's like a lot of like things dying, it feels like, both literally, like a lot of people have been having health issues that I've been noticing like in my local communities. And then also a lot of pets have been passing or having health issues. And also car crashes. Like I have like three good friends that have been in a car crash within the last Mars and Gemini. Um, and
Man,
it's insane.
why do you think Mars and Gemini and retrograde specifically would rule car crashes?
Um, I mean, Mercury in general is kind of transportation, especially like short distance travel, which is a third house thing, but it is very much a Mercury thing as well. Um, I think the differentiation there is third house is more the environment itself and like the path and what's along the path rather than the vehicle itself, which would be Mercury. Um, so with Mars being involved too, it's very quick and it's very sudden, and it's the energy of like a crash. And so it's one of those things where, um, especially for people born during the day, I think all three people I'm thinking of were born during the day. Uh, Mars is very hot, and it's just destructive. Like it's too hot to do anything with. It just consumes anything it comes in contact with. So yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's very literal. I think Mars and Gemini and car crashes.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I remember how we were talking about letting go of expectations last week and like chilling out.
Mm,
I think if you don't do that, that's when like things like car crashes or like physical manifestations of that. Um,
mm,
but yeah, I don't know. There were like not any car crashes in my life in a metaphorical or literal sense, but I do think that it does make me think about like just the speed at which my life was going this week was very fast, and I had to be like very mindful of how I was spending my energy, and to like just not put pressure on myself to like over deliver anything and stuff, because I started like that like kind of full-time hours for a job I have now, and like that's pretty exciting, but I was also just getting caught up in like the rhythm of how fast it was going, which was overwhelming. And I was like, wow, this is very like interesting Scorpio and Gemini energy, because it's like a very intense job. It's also very fun and light at the same time. So yeah. And I also had some angst about my love life, but funneled through that too, because I think Scorpio and Gemini are interesting sorts of placements to be thinking about those things with. So yeah. Huh.
Yeah, definitely a lot of deaths, whether of ideas or relationships or jobs or pets. I have a friend that just lost they were fired from their job, but they're like, I was just talking to them earlier today. They're like, I think it's actually a blessing in disguise. And I was like, it's not even disguise. Like you have
No, this
full
guy
freedom now to pick whatever job you want. Like you have stable housing, you have stable, like you're in a, like, this is not a job you were happy at. You have not been happy there for a long time. Like this was coming sooner or later, and I'm glad it happened. Like I'm proud of you for, you know, like, you know, seeing it through or whatever. And so I think I don't know, I was outside earlier today, and I'm very much, you know, astrology reflects real life. And like I was just thinking about how like the leaves were dying. It was really windy today, and like the trees are starting to get to that point where they don't have any leaves left and it's just branches. And I don't know, it was kind of like this is the time where darkness increases. Like this is what dying is like. But it was peaceful. It was sunny. It felt good, and it was
Yeah,
relaxful, but it was
it
also
was
kind of
70 degrees
cathartic.
in Brooklyn today. Like I was like, why is
Ooh.
New York literally this sunny and hot in like November? Crazy. Um, but yeah, also my friend who's a Scorpio rising got laid off and was like happy about it too. He was like, more freedom to explore now. And I'm just like, whoa. I mean, that attitude is really great about it, you know. But it was like, yeah, it was kind of like that jolt of like a lot of let go of expectations, the unexpected things will happen. And I'm just like, that's for sure. But yeah, so even though it was one major transit last week, that major transit was like action packed.
Yeah, it was definitely action packed is a good word for it. And it's weird, like again, it felt like nothing happened, but everything happened at the same time. It felt like, you know, like when like anxious thoughts before bed, like when you're up at night and you're just like ruminating and like not even like spiraling, but just like, you know, going through that 10 minutes feels like such a long time in that space. And it kind of feels like that's what this week has kind of felt like.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, yeah, it's like a lot of energy, and it kind of set us up for like the transits happening this week. We want to just like take a look at those and such.
yes.
Let's take a look. So November 7th, which will be Monday, Venus in Scorpio is going to be squaring Saturn in Aquarius, not to mention the moon is going to be entering Taurus. And even if it won't be exactly at the 18-degree square of the other two, it will still be loosely squared. And wait a minute, that is literally exactly on my Mercury in Aquarius. Okay, well, that's going to be great. Yummy, yummy. And then November 8th, there's a full moon eclipse, but another eclipse season. We have a full moon eclipse in Taurus at 16 degrees, which is also slightly conjunct or slightly aspecting my Mercury in Aquarius, while the Mercury is conjuncting the sun in Scorpio at 16 degrees and opposing Uranus in oh my God, this is a lot. There is literally going to be a Uranus retrograde conjunct this full moon eclipse. Holy moly. My nodal reversal is screaming. And yeah, then on November 8th, which is Wednesday, the sun on Scorpio is opposing Uranus in retrograde in Taurus, 16 degrees. while the moon's going to
Oh,
Gemini.
November 9th.
What?
Sorry, you said November 8th. Is that the 9th that we're talking about?
Oh, did I say 9th? I meant 9th, Wednesday.
Okay.
Yes, perhaps well, either way, it's a Wednesday, people. November 10th is Mercury in Scorpio, square Saturn Aquarius at 18 degrees, again on my Mercury. And Venus in Scorpio will be trining Neptune retrograde in Pisces 22 degrees, which I believe is very near your moon, right?
Yes, actually very close.
What degrees are
I want to say 24 or 5. I'm checking right now.
Geez,
25.
dangerously close. Okay,
Yeah, Neptune's. Yeah.
November 11th, Sun's Scorpio squaring Saturn. Just like Scorpio pile up, squaring, hitting, and the moon's entering Cancer. And then yeah, November 12th will be Saturday, I believe, and Mercury and Scorpio will be trining Neptune retrograde in Pisces. So everything's coming up Scorpio this week. We're getting all the oppositions and squares with the Taurus and Aquarius aspects. And yeah, in the meantime, that's just a lot happening.
It is.
Oh my God, this is actually so fitting of the things that have also been sort of buzzing through my brain lately, actually.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts first, Ray?
I'm wondering if it would be, because the only thing before the eclipse is just Venus squaring Saturn, which will still be in effect during the eclipse. Maybe if we look at the chart for the eclipse, that would be a good start.
Yeah, let's do that.
I have her pulled up, and by that I mean I did. As we noticed, or might have noticed, I'm in a different room today.
Should we like
different layout?
Unless someone's putting this as a podcast style. Do you want to share your screen or something?
Yes. I think it's going to share the whole screen, which is cool. Fine.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, well, I think it's because it's your Zoom room, so exciting for those who are watching this.
Here we go. We have eclipse chart. So as you see, we've got the moon in Taurus down towards the bottom left. Is going to be conjunct Uranus exactly. So that's going to be a big deal. And then on the other side of that, with the sun and Scorpio, you've also got Venus there, Mercury there, as well. Then they're making a T square with Saturn. And
yeah, Saturn's just hanging out. Saturn's just like vibing, and it's like such a tight T square too.
Yeah, well, Mars is kind of forming a stronger square to Neptune, and a little bit with Jupiter, but that's not necessarily applying. That's like the opposite of applying.
Yeah, well, gotta love that Uranus conjunct moon too, always. Which it's like loosely conjunct my nodal, or loosely opposing my nodal reversal and loosely scoring my Mercury. This is a lot.
Well, it makes me think like with the sun kind of being, the light bearer, it's shedding light on things, while obviously the moon is too. It's kind of the same light, but it's almost like the light that it's shining is it's like working. Sorry, I had such a thought and then I went to say it, and you know where that thought went? Far away.
It's just like, yeah, it'll come back. Continue speaking on something else, maybe.
Yeah, but definitely with Uranus there, we can expect with certainty that it will be something unexpected, some kind of like a lightning bolt, which actually makes me think of, whenever I think of that with Uranus, because it can be very sudden, it can be very unexpected, and sorry, I just wanted to look at us again.
It can be
Um,
unexpected and
yeah, it can be very sudden and very unexpected. And um, the image is a lightning bolt. And one of the things that also comes to mind with the lightning bolt is in like I Ching, where they have the one where it's like the lightning over the lightning. And the meaning is something to the effect of like when a lightning strikes, it's really like sudden and like scary, and you get kind of shocked. But then the second burst uh of thunder is like the laughter that emits because you realize like, oh, it was kind of silly to be scared of that in the first place. And so I think of it kind of from that viewpoint of just like, oh my gosh, that was like, oh my gosh. But then the aftermath of like, okay, I'm still here. It was just lightning. It was just like nature. Like it was something that was inevitable. It was something that like I couldn't stop that any more than I could stop the lightning from striking the ground, kind of thing.
mhm. Yeah, it is a season for lots of that, but it's very fascinating actually. Because I like resonate with like the themes you're talking about, but at the same time, because everything's like ping-ponging with like fixed signs. I think that's why it feels almost like more horrendous, like
Mm,
slow crawl, because instead of mutable energy, which is speedy, it's like you're stuck and then you just get boinged out into a different sense of like stuckness and stuff.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and also how sometimes like you can be stuck and you can be stuck in one area, but then the way it expresses itself or is brought to your attention is through a different area. And you might be like, oh, I really want this and I really want this. But really what you want is that instead.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think a concept that actually comes up when I look at these, because it's just like square after square after square, like not just talking about the eclipse for the entire week. Um, I actually was like watching this like video on the desire to not exist and kind of like unpacking sort of what people are going through when they like experience that, because it's not the same as like I want to die, like depression. And the concept of sickness unto death by Kierkegaard is actually brought up, and how basically
Mm,
it's like this whole thing around like when like the idea of like a sickness unto death is that while the human conception of death is that like life is over, that's the end, but the Christian conception of it is that like, oh, like you'll just go to heaven and get eternal life. But so okay, if you're not afraid of death then because you're just going to like end up going to heaven, then what should you be afraid of? And actually it's the inability to die that is to be feared, and that like
mm,
the despair that one might experience as a spiritual death is kind of like this idea that like the pain of like whatever the fuck this all is will just never stop. Like it's actually that like I will continue to exist and continue to like have to fucking put up with all these desires and like inconveniences. There's no sweetness of an escape of death, right? And I was thinking a lot about this concept this week because I was realizing that I was thinking, I was unpacking a lot of my trauma around like never having dated anyone and like my experience of like what that says about me, right? A lot of it's my own psychodrama, but like I was just thinking about how I'm not necessarily scared that I'll never find anyone, but that like the pain that I'm feeling right now will just never stop. There just won't be
mm,
any movement in my life, because even if I were to go through another string of failures of like breakups before things actually actualized or whatever, like it'd be more interesting to kind of live like a different version of the same loop than to like be stuck in this like eternal sense of winter where you can't see the end or any of that. I was realizing that like
mm,
I think I suffer more when I have this assumption that like my current not pleasant experience will only continue and have zero development or anything. And that was like a huge thing I think plagued me when I was a kid. It was like this sense of like I will never be able to escape my house, escape my body, and my life is like this like tormented, suicidal child. And then I look at like how that hasn't happened. It's like pretty crazy. But to
mm,
bring that back to like this fixed sign, sort of like T squared, like going from Scorpio to Taurus to Aquarius and just like cycling through that, it like reminds me of how, well, okay, I guess like how I experience it is like it like pings my Aquarius Mercury, but I think a lot of the time, because I have a very loose opposition of a Leo moon and Aquarius Mercury, I think reminding myself of how brave and like fierce and courageous I am, just, not because I'm Leo moon helps you recognize that part of me. That like is what brings me like salvation, is what warms me up in a sense, right? It can like also burn me, but like everything else, I think with my chart in terms of like how the nodes work and the Mercury are probably more painful than like the Leo moon itself. But I was thinking about how, okay, when I look at like what's happening this week, I also think about what's not happening. And there's no Leo transits, right? Like everything is squaring. It's like all three of the four fixed signs are doing stuff. They're having a party, whether it's like a good party or whatever, they're all like dancing together. And Leo is just not in the mix because it's Scorpio and Taurus, a pair, and then Aquarius. I was thinking of how it's interesting that like I think because the moon is like the closest fixed sign in my consciousness, my like there's a conception of like what energy is. I think that that's why it's like so painful to like go through that for me specifically, because it's like, oh, like I never get to see me as representation in this like little thing. Like I get to speak as if I belong, right? Because Mercury, my Aquarius, but my Leo moon is going to be like, what the fuck? Like these energies are like almost faintly familiar because they're fixed, but like I like the fire element, there's no room for that because we're too busy doing earth, water, air. So like when I look at that, it reminds me of this. It's kind of like this idea of like I experienced the sickness into death sort of like withdrawal of like continuous life without any excitement or inspiration arising, which I associate with like my elemental fireness. And I'd say like this past week and probably this upcoming week are like concentrations of elements that I'm not as familiar with because I do have mostly fire in my chart. So like it's like, okay, I'm gonna rely on the part of my chart that kind of trines this Taurus stuff then, but like everything else is going to feel painful moving through water and like air and like because my Mercury is not like something I particularly like feel close to, like I don't identify very strongly with it, so it's just like not going to be particularly enjoyable. I'm just trying to learn what I can while my Leo moon just hangs on the background.
Sorry, I made that face because I keep thinking about the fact you're like, I don't identify very strongly with my with Mercury. And then I found out earlier this week that you speak a whole other language I didn't know. And you're like, I don't really identify with Mercury, and you're like literally multilingual and like it's no big deal. You know what I mean? That's incredibly mercurial.
Wait, back up. Wait, so you're saying, are you tying this to me in like Mandarin basically?
Yeah.
Oh. Wait, sorry. Can you like connect again how me being multilingual like came out in your, is it because like I'm not committed to one language because I do speak multiple kind of, or
just because mercurial is about, I mean, obviously it's about communication.
Mhm.
But I think what gets, so something that I really resonated with one time I was reading, I think it was Rolling Planets, the book. I was reading the Virgo stuff, and it was talking about Mercury. And I hadn't really thought very much about my relationship with Mercury or about what that would mean for me or how that would show up in my life.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I've always been interested in foreign languages. That's something that's always been, to me, that's a way that people can connect with each other and learn about each other, learn about where they came from. And, just it, if you can't speak someone's language, you're so limited in how you can communicate with them.
Mhm.
And so very much like as a vessel for unity and for combining things. I have Mercury and Libra, and I'm saying all this.
This is a very
um,
Mercury Libra thing.
yeah, I just realized the irony after I said language is like a vessel for unity. I was like,
Wrestle for unity. I'm just like, oh.
But it does, it connects people. It opens up doors that weren't open before. And yeah, I think it's something that I didn't even acknowledge very much until I was reading that, and I was like, oh, that interest alone is mercurial, that like respect for it. Because not everyone has that. Some people are content with knowing what they know language wise. And
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
fine with them, but I'm not, I'm different.
I just thought of actually also like the two other people that speak like Chinese like nearly as well as me enough to like talk about like our relationship to culture changing because of that. We're actually both Mercury and Aquariuses too. So that's crazy actually.
Mm,
Like the only two people that I could ever say get how I feel about being Chinese. We're both Aquarius conjunct Mercury and Aquarius, like suns. And actually,
mm,
one is also Leo moon like me, and the other is a Leo rising. So it's like that like opposition of like
mm,
having this fierce sense of self and also being very generous and like, giving back. So, I have not really thought about that, which is funny because I'm thinking about mercurial matters while Mars is a Gemini in my seventh
mm.
house. Unions indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
The sickness into death is only cured when you realize that it's okay to desire and that you live life a little like that, like it's like a key for you to sort of live life less fearfully if you play your
Mm,
cards right. Because I think that's a big realization I realized this week. Like I started having my perception change a lot when I realized that like I identify as a very brave person, but it's because of when I look back at like everything I've done, like it makes me be like, oh, I'm brave. But I don't even think about like ways I could be even braver than I am right now. I think that was where my Leo-ness came back into play. And I had a space among the Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius pile, which hasn't like technically started aspecting crazily, but like the week is about to begin. So yeah. But I was thinking about how like whenever I really trust my intensity, which is like my Scorpio North node, and then I let myself solidify it, like with Taurus, and I can then activate my ability to communicate very well to like multiple people's like languages of like how they process,
mm,
and also like encourage them and be like this very steady, like nurturing motherly figure with my Leo moon. But it was just like, oh, I can embrace this instead of like just viewing it as just through like, oh, I'm like left out and like I suffer and da da da, which is like really easy for me to get into.
mm. Yeah. And even not to backtrack a long time, but I'm gonna backtrack a long time. Way earlier you were talking and it was making me think, um, you were kind of talking about like your life now and then like your life when you were a kid. And um correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded kind of like you were saying like you kind of didn't think the kind of future you have, well, the present you have now, the future, in the past. You didn't think that the present you have now was like possible as a future.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would have thought it was too good to be true or unrealistic or out of reach. And
Yeah, no,
I think
that's completely what I meant.
okay, perfect. And so it also made me think about like how Mercury also has to do with like it's very childish, and so I feel like sometimes it can have to do with early childhood. Um, I mean, I also, again, my third house is ruled by Mercury, so for me, it kind of is regardless. But I think there's always that kind of childish, either curiosity or playfulness to it, and so let's see.
Thanks.
With Mars and with Gemini, it makes me think about, especially with Mars retrograding, going back on beliefs, especially early held beliefs, and with everything in Scorpio, those beliefs dying. Um, what you thought was possible
Hmm.
might be dying, but then that opens the doors for new possibilities that you weren't open to, while that thought was still alive.
Oh, okay. No, I got the dying part with the Scorpio, but I've never really thought of like child. Where did you get the sorry? Can you explain again the beliefs with like Mercury with childlike?
Yeah, just because Mars is in Gemini, kind of thinking just the movement of Mars retrograding, going backwards, like our beliefs that we've had, just because with Mercury kind of,
Mhm.
um, I mean,
Oh,
beliefs that's
Mercury,
kind of
that's
almost,
triggering beliefs.
Yeah, it's kind of almost a Jupiter thing at the same time, but maybe that's kind of the intersection of Jupiter and Mercury's beliefs. Um, where yeah, yeah, and having a healthy belief that you can question and be curious about and flexible with.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's
but
crazy.
yeah, just
Yeah.
yeah, Mars retrograding, going back, changing those beliefs.
No, like so my Mars is actually in retrograde in a Mercury
Mm,
ruled sign in my natal chart. And I've always been told that I dwell in the past a lot. But I'm realizing now that
mm,
like my way of fighting through conflict is that I go back in time and think about my belief systems like a lot, just naturally. So like kind of like the misery I've been putting myself through is pretty native to like how I am, considering I was born with Mars in retrograde. And I've never really explored it too much, but like what you're saying makes me realize that like yeah, I've actually done pretty well with like dissolving beliefs like this season because I'm really committed to like not falling back into old victim patterns of like, oh, like everyone just hates me, da da da. Like, because then it's like, dude, am I gonna be ungrateful that like somehow things have started clicking and I have like so much more relational wealth than I've ever had? Like, no, we are gonna be creative. We're gonna like fight this and like find a better way to look at everything. Cause like I'm sick of thinking that just like no one wants me, so I'm gonna be that way. When there's so much proof I'm probably blocking out because of my trauma. And that was like a big turning point for me. I actually really let go of actually today, as we're recording this, a huge belief that had been holding me back for a lot of my life, which was this belief that like normal people get to escape the consequences of life, but I don't get to, which was a huge thing my mom
mm,
used to tell me about me, that she thought my life would be harder or something than other people's because
mm,
of how I'm wired. But then I realized that like, but like the things I've done are just an opportunity for me to like um refine my relationship with fear and like be more free, and realizing that like even if you have a cushy life, you're like some kind of like 7-figure like 27-year-old person living in like freaking like Flatiron in New York, and you have like a mediocre relationship and like a mediocre social life, you could live your fear probably with, or live your life with more fear, and you can't escape that, and life will just sort of trash you if you're not careful, and even if you're careful still do that. But realizing that like I'm not afraid of life anymore because I like understand like how to interface with fear, and that was like the whole point of like getting stronger and enlightening. And that at the end of the day, even if you numb out like love or wanting more out of your life, you can't numb out the fear that will come for you. That was a huge
mm,
thing I realized today too, and I think it's very scorpionic actually, because it's like talking about like the
mm.
underworld, because I feel like fear is like a creation of the underworld. And I feel like a lot of Scorpios, when they're paranoid, is because they're like reacting to the fact that like fear kind of like lives in them as an embodiment. And I do think that like my Pluto affiliations probably amplify this, because I am at the cusp of rebirth constantly with 12th house or first house, depending on which you look at, which system. But yeah, the point is that like I basically realized that like whenever you are like stuck in fear, you really are just like stuck. It's like that sickness into death like thing. And realizing that like I don't actually envy at all anymore, like people that like have normal lives. And a huge reason why I self-deprecate about relationships. It's like the last nail in the coffin of like proof that I can't have a normal life. No man will ever like love me. I'm special, I'm different, like, but not in a good way. But then I
Mm,
realized, wait, I don't want what a lot of these fear-based relationships are. Like, I want like a
yeah,
relationship like people love each other wholly. And a lot of people can't do that because they themselves are not fearless. And like it's not wrong that like I from a young age refused to like fear dictate how I would like operate in the world, even though I was like sad and depressed. I was never like ruled by fear. I would be afraid and
mm.
just not let myself condemn myself. And I'm like, damn, if that's not some fucking Leo Scorpio, Leo square North Node Scorpio shit, though, what the fuck?
Well, that's so interesting. It made me think a lot about the relationship between actually Jupiter and Saturn, which both are being hit by this eclipse, which is super interesting because you've got the square from everything in Scorpio going to Saturn. And also, from the moon, from Uranus. And so there's that tension there, but then you've also got the trine from everything of Scorpio to Neptune and to Jupiter,
Mhm.
and
Pisces.
a little bit looser to Jupiter, but yeah, and Pisces. And so it makes me think about like how um I love that you mentioned Scorpio, because for some reason that didn't come to mind when I was thinking of this, and that's very much also part of it. I was thinking about like how Saturn can rule death as well, because Mars and Saturn can both signify death.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's interesting because we're in the time of death. We're in Scorpio season. We're in the underworld. That's just the weather right now. And Saturn is in Aquarius. It's in its own sign. It just went direct. It's able to do what it needs to do, which is allow death to happen, allow boundaries to crumble that have been, like, I think of a machine that has like maybe like a microwave or like a toaster that is just on its last leg, that you've just been using for so long that it's ready to just crumble and die. And it feels like that kind of energy. But at the same time, we have Jupiter in Pisces, and that's all about hope and about, the endless possibilities that exist in hope, and how it's always expansive. And so at the same time, it's like they're both doing their job of letting things crumble and fade away and die and change, but at the same time it brings hope, and it shows an empty, you can plant anything you want in an empty field, but if you have a field full of stuff that is already there, you can't plant anything else. It's already there.
Mhm.
um
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because like death is also just like a factory reset of all the settings that like need to go. And I think I need to like talk about this more with like all the people I know that are suffering right now. 'Cause like
yeah.
everyone's having like this like huge like requiem, is that how you pronounce that word? Yeah, everyone
Right.
really
I don't
like
know.
going through it, right? And like I
Hmm.
haven't even seen a lot of my friends since moving to New York because like everyone's busy and I sense it. And like I'm like literally going through some shit I don't want to talk about, or like I don't want anyone to touch with a 10-foot pole. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, and but like I really like how this whole thing is like spurred by you just pointing out that like um a lot of this is going back in the past. And that's like really meaningful to realize, oh, like
Mm.
Mercury retrogrades are like for going backwards to like reassess how you communicate and how you process probably like your framework. While for Mars, it's like reprocessing how you approach things. And I feel like I've learned that like how I approach life is very mercurial and very methodical.
Mm.
And I never really thought about like how that's affected me, because I think that I prefer to approach life by reassessing my belief systems constantly, which is like Mercury, and my belief systems live in my past. Like it's more clear to figure out like what I believe based on like how I've acted, because it's not consciously something I'm like, yes, there I think this, therefore I'm going to do this. It's more like I feel like doing this. I don't really know why, but it'll probably like be revealed later why I've
Yeah.
said that. So that's something that if we weren't recording this, I'd like go and like type that real quick somewhere, because I was always kind of shamed for doing things this way by like people, because they were like, why do you
Mm.
draw past? And I would always be kind of like, none of your business, because I would know I was being proactive, but I wouldn't, again, like just meta commenting. I really wouldn't know why I did it. I just knew it was the right thing to do. And now I have language for that like, oh, it's because I actually can't really gather information about what I'm thinking on a deep core level as a framework in the present. I have to go back in the past to like look at the linear sort of track. And that's pretty important, because you can't really destroy something before you understand it, because otherwise I could kill off something that's
Mm.
really important, right? Like when I'm like decluttering, can't just actually just throw away everything. That's really irresponsible.
Mm. It's also very Saturnian too, with going to the past, and with Mercury and Aquarius. It's like a very Saturnian way of thinking of, what kind of information from the past can we make useful in the present. Like,
Oh, are you saying
so
like,
Aquarian, so Saturnian.
is it because Saturn rules time, or are you saying something different about the past specifically?
Oh no, like fully the time. Yeah, because it's all about time. There's a lot you can say about time. I could go on a rabbit hole for days.
About how sadist children and something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What is your relationship with like this square stuff? Because like you don't have a lot of fixed energy, do you?
No. I
Wow,
don't
you have
think
no fixed energy, do you? You have like the
I have
cardinal.
no Taurus.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
no Aquarius,
I
no
mean, you're still
Leo.
going through it, but like at the
I
same time,
have,
it's interesting.
yeah, nothing in Scorpio either. I don't think I have any fixed placements. It's
Well,
very cardinal, but then I have mutable luminaries. So it's like, I don't know.
are you a day
Um,
chart or a night chart?
night.
Hmm,
Oh
gotcha.
yeah. See, that's why I feel like I like Mars so much. Is because to me, it's Mars Cancer. Um, it's like a campfire at night. It's like warm. It's a heated, weighted blanket that can tuck you in. That's Mars to me. It's the movement of being tucked in.
Yeah.
The pressure of a hug, that kind of thing. Um, but it's because in a night chart, you look at the sky and Mars is really hot. Well, it's not so hot during the night. It's a little bit cooler.
It's kind of weird how it's like actually been kind of hot, like weather-wise. Because I thought it would be colder
Hmm.
right now. And I mean, it's still like colder in LA, but it's not like okay, not today, because like today was like 70, and I was like, this is like wrong. But yeah,
Yeah.
what's actually also funny was I was having these realizations today as I was wearing like my Unakite bracelet and I am blanking on the name right now. My blue, I cannot remember. What are you? It's like this like pretty prominent stone, like the one with like the little black ridges. Usually it's like white, not goldstone. I cannot remember right now, but it'll come back to me.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was like literally wearing these today, and I was just like, get me through this. And I think my perspective of like, I'm not trying to escape pain, I'm trying to make better sense of it, helped me. Because I just like stopped resisting. And I was like, I'm gonna surrender to the pain, like I've always been. I can be even braver and more ambitious just because it's like kind of like, oh, my life's going well now. I don't have to like think consciously about like what I'm supposed to be improving on, especially because I hit like a really core nerve with this whole romantic stuff. And I like
Hmm.
it's like probably been the hardest beliefs to shift, like the hardest for sure. But like today I just like made a commitment to like just embrace it, because I was like, listen, I'm gonna fucking probably be in this for a second, because the eclipses are not gonna move, or the nodes aren't gonna move from Taurus and Scorpio for like another, oh my god, how many
Year,
months?
I think.
Not exactly, it's in the summer, so during Leo's,
Hmm.
they're moving Leo season, so I think it's 9 months. I'm like, no, I just calculated it. No, it's 8 months, which is still like a lot.
That's enough.
No,
Yeah.
I actually don't know math, but point is they're moving summer in the summer. And I'm like, okay, I'm going through my nodal reversal, and I'm about to enter a fifth house Mars year. And my Mars is in retrograde. This is just preparing me. My Saturn return is going to be starting. Like, life is going to be like still pretty fun and functional, but not easier. So I might as well just appreciate this. And what can I do with the pain? I can just do the concept you taught me earlier this week. It was Wu Wei, or no, wait, let me do it with a Chinese accent. Wu Wei, not not Sans accent American style, but Wu Wei is like, the inertia of like, you can be doing something by doing nothing. And I feel like it actually really grounded me by realizing that when I'm listening and surrendering, I'm gaining as well, something I
Hmm.
couldn't hear otherwise beneath the noise.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot. Um, like a lot of it can be summarized pretty well with the concept of um, just being open to the possibilities and don't be too quick to rebuild what's lost.
Yeah, you
Um,
got me. I definitely do that. I'm a big builder. I'm like, okay, we lost one thing, gotta replace it with another.
well, there's such a good analogy that we came up
Oh, it's raining outside.
with
Don't
the
mixing concrete during the rain.
yeah, with no, the other with a friend slash client, where we were talking about boundaries and how they're only helpful when we were talking about progress as laying tracks, like for a rail, and um, setting boundaries to help guide where that rail goes. And we were talking about it in the context of using transits as the guide for those boundaries. But then the conversation kind of turned into, um, just because we're laying the track down and we're moving doesn't mean we're actually making progress. It just means that we're moving. And
Mhm.
sometimes when we put up too many boundaries and too many walls, we just create a maze and we're just walking back and
Oh,
forth in the same
yeah.
spot. And so, in order to actually grow and move, sometimes like doing a little bit less is more because then you might need to build a track differently in a different environment. Um, and if you keep just building it the same way with the same structures and boundaries that you have now, you might just be wasting a lot of energy walking around in a circle when trying convinced that you're actually moving somewhere.
Oh, that's a good point for our listeners to remember right now, because life be hectic. I think this is also something we should explain on in future episodes, because these boundaries are getting out of hand. I have learned to discern now when a boundary is a boundary versus a wall. And I think this is
Mm,
something that we will continue to understand, because Scorpios like tear down your faulty things and make new ones. Because Taurus is like, we want things that last. A boundary that's ungrounded and not particularly helpful will not last, because it will be
mm,
challenged. And if you just try to dig in more of the faulty foundation, you're just gonna like hit rock bottom, like not in a good way.
yeah, it's really interesting thinking about everything. Um, in the context, I started. This might be a bit personal, so I won't get too much into it. Also, because we're starting to get low on time, but
Mhm.
um, so I don't talk to my parents at all. We're not really on speaking terms. Long story short, I'm in a same-sex marriage, and they don't like it. So we haven't talked for I think over a year at least, and I kept thinking about it a lot recently and about how that boundary of not talking, it served the purpose to distance and to protect and give myself space to kind of heal from that and sort out how I feel about that and what I think about it and to really figure out what I want out of that relationship, if anything.
Mhm.
And within the last week, I started drafting a letter to them. And so
Mm.
it's so interesting. We're talking about beliefs changing and boundaries being reassessed, and dying beliefs dying even.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I just think it's really fascinating the timing of it.
It is very fascinating because, yeah, like I think all boundaries need to be updated, because we get updated as people. So, like, if it's not the season for you to talk to your parents, maybe next season you'll be able to. But always be
Mm,
reassessing, just as how you should always be reassessing your commitments, always be reassessing your boundaries.
yeah, and be open to not rushing through it because I mean you can't.
Mhm. I think boundaries are really like fluid things, and we treat them as solid, we condemn ourselves. But if we are like, we're dancing in this, like with this boundary, then like it works pretty well, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's probably pretty good. Do you have any closing thoughts, sentiments, questions,
Mm,
concerns?
nope, I don't have any. If you don't, also, I remember what this is now. It's blue appetite. Yeah.
Appetite,
Yes. It's a
like
pretty
hungry
cool.
appetite?
No, it's like APATITE, I believe. And yeah,
Ooh.
it just helps you with communications, I suppose, and stuff. It's like throat chakra stuff. But it's funny that I
Hmm.
unconsciously reached for it, because I don't usually reach for this stone. But I was like, I I just needed today for some reason. And then, yeah, it helped me a lot with like the internal communications. So, yeah. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later then, Ray.
Yes, have a good night.
You too.